Hi there, and welcome once again to Friday Focus, where we do not focus on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Friday Focus continues its look at the Psalms. Today, we're all the way up to Psalm 92. We started at number 1, and we have gone all the way through 91, and today we look at 92. I call it Building a Life That Lasts. How are we to define good? In an upside-down world where people speak their opinions and call it truth, where right has become wrong and wrong has become right in so many areas, what's wrong with a society when goodness becomes a pejorative, as in the phrase goody two-shoes? What does good really mean? Well, according to Merriam-Webster, it has many meanings, depending on its use. Some of the ways it may be defined are as follows: a favorable character or tendency, or bountiful, fertile. How about attractive, or fitting, advantageous? And then there's pleasant, wholesome, sensible, honorable, proper, virtuous, moral, ethical, and lots more. However, that's plenty. It can be used in lots of ways. However, I'd like you to think for a moment about the values or the definitions that we just cited when we read through Psalm 92, which is unique among the Psalms. It's the only one explicitly labeled a song to be sung on the Sabbath day. That detail matters. This psalm isn't rushed. It isn't reactive. It's written from a place of rest and perspective, exactly the posture many of us struggle to find in everyday life. At its core, Psalm 92 asks a very quiet but powerful question. What kind of life actually lasts? In a world obsessed with speed, visibility, and short-term success, this psalm invites us to slow down and reframe what a flourishing life really means. And it looks at several things, and that's what we want to do today. We want to take a look at those things. The first thing that it wants to talk about and show us and teach us is about goodness and gratitude. Let's take a look at Psalm 91 verses 1, Psalm 92 verses 1 and 2. It says, "It's good to give thanks to the Lord, to sing praises to the Most High. It's good to proclaim your unfailing love in the morning, your faithfulness in the evening." Psalm 92 verses 1 and 2. Given the definitions that we cited earlier, do you see what I see? If so, why don't more people do what's written? Why don't more people put those definitions of good into everyday practice? And how would our lives change if we did? The psalm doesn't open with requests or complaints or plans, but with what's good and with gratitude. Notice the rhythm. It's morning and night in verse 2. This isn't about one emotional moment. It's about a daily pattern. Is that important? Well, gratitude isn't denial of hardship. It's actually orientation. When we start and end our day remembering God's love and faithfulness, we anchor our lives in something steady. It's good to begin that way. No matter what you're going through, seek out ways to be thankful. Why? Why should I do that? Because gratitude trains us to notice and enjoy God's presence, even when life feels ordinary or difficult. Then the psalm talks about joy that comes from God's work, not ours. Listen to verse 4 of Psalm 92. "You thrill me, Lord, with all you have done for me. I sing for joy because of what you have done. You see, this joy isn't rooted in achievement. The psalmist doesn't say, you made me glad by my success. Instead, joy flows from recognizing what God has done. When our joy depends entirely on productivity, approval, or outcomes, it becomes fragile. Psalm 92 invites us to let our joy grow from trust rather than control. And so you might ask yourself, am I more aware of what I've done or what God is doing? Do I allow myself to celebrate God's work even when my own plans feel unfinished? This kind of joy stabilizes us when life doesn't go according to our schedule. And then the psalm continues. It talks about the danger of short-term thinking. We can find that in verses 6 and 7. Listen to what it says. Only a simpleton would not know, and only a fool would not understand this. And then he goes on to tell us what he's talking about. Though the wicked sprout like weeds, and evildoers flourish, they will be destroyed forever. That's ominous. This may sound harsh, but its message is deeply practical. The psalmist is warning against being fooled by appearances. Some things grow quickly, but they don't last. Not everything that looks successful is healthy. Not everything that grows fast is rooted deep. The author issues a warning against envying shortcuts that compromise integrity, comparing your growth to someone else's, and assuming that delay means failure. Wisdom requires patience. Psalm 92 encourages us to zoom out and think long-term about character, faith, and endurance. Okay, what else does the psalm want to talk to us about? Well, trusting God in the face of opposition. How about that? Psalm 92 acknowledges enemies and opposition, but it refuses to let them define the story. God's position, not the problem, is central. Notice what he says in verse 8. But you, O Lord, will be exalted forever. Rather than mean you're losing, opposition might mean that you're growing and standing for something that matters. What can we do? Well, there's a few things. First of all, resist the urge to panic or personalize everything. Secondly, remember our circumstances do not threaten God's authority. And thirdly, let challenges refine us rather than harden us. Wise words from the scripture. So Psalm 92 moves on. This time he talks about the power of being planted. We find that in verses 12 through 13. But the godly will flourish like palm trees and grow strong like the cedars of Lebanon. For they are transplanted to the Lord's own house. They flourish in the courts of our God. Flourishing doesn't come from constant movement. It comes from being planted. And sometimes growth happens quietly before it ever becomes visible. All right, Psalm 92, what else do you want to show us? Well, how about redefining fruitfulness at every age? It just seems to be that the elderly are kind of being ostracized in society to a certain extent. Everything is catering to the younger people. But verse 14 of Psalm 92 says this about the believer. Even in old age, they will still produce fruit. They will remain vital and green. Now, if you've got a few years under your belt, that's a pretty important verse. Because just because an individual is elderly doesn't mean they cannot be fruitful. Encouragement, prayer, mentoring, and presence are all forms of fruit that come with gray hair. God values longevity, faithfulness, and depth, not just visibility. All right, let's move on to verse 15. They will declare the Lord is just. He is my rock. There is no evil in him. What's he talking about? He's talking about a life that points beyond itself. Psalm 92 ends where it began, with God's character. A flourishing life ultimately becomes a testimony not to personal success, but to God's faithfulness. The goal of a faithful life isn't perfection, it's witness. When we live rooted, grateful, and with patient lives, we quietly declare that God is trustworthy. We're reminded that the best lives aren't built quickly. They're grown day by day through gratitude, trust, and deep roots in God. In a culture that seeks instant everything, Psalm 92 invites us to choose depth over shallowness and faithfulness over indifference. Psalm 92 assures us that lives planted in God will still bear fruit. What does that mean to you and me? Well, as we read through Psalm 92, we quickly learn that a life that lasts will put God first. This is Dr. Vic Hollyfriend in his grace. If you have any comments or questions, you can address them to me at vicsfridayfocus@gmail.com. That's all one word, vicsfridayfocus@gmail.com. God bless you. Have a tremendous week and make it a life that lasts. Put God first.